So recently I've been testing out the new alternative sights in the finals, and to be honest, it's not really based on your preference, and there are a lot of significant advantages and disadvantages to certain sights and things like that. Starting off with the red dot sight, for the V9S, the red dot sight doesn't really make that much of a difference, but in terms of visual clarity, it does seem like the red dot sight makes it a lot more easier to see, while also making the V9S take up less space on your screen. And generally, I think the sights are the way to go because you can see the entire enemy body when you're shooting, and this can help you with knowing what they're about to do, what direction they're about to run, which in turn can help you aim. However, keep in mind that the red dot sight does move. Trying to shoot based off the red dot on the red dot sight might not be the move. I do recommend using an external crosshair to sort of help you keep track of the middle of your screen when you're shooting. For the M11, the red dot sight, I do feel like it also helps reduce the amount of space that the M11 is taking up on your screen. On the left here, you can kind of see the nose sight is just a hunk of metal, just like taking up the whole bottom side of your screen, while the red dot sight one sort of takes up a lot less of that screen, while also giving you a good picture of where the enemy is. For the AKM, sort of the same sort of thing here. AKM is taking up a lot less of your screen. You get a red dots to see the whole enemy body. The iron sight isn't really blocking much of the enemy body. And in general, I feel like the red dot sight doesn't really change your gameplay too much. It might be a preference thing, but I would argue that the red dot sights do give you a better visual indicator of the enemy. However, for the FCAR, I guess it technically is a red dot sight, but I would call this a hollow sight. I would say the FCAR iron sight is probably takes less of your screen space in comparison to the other weapons just by how it looks. But I would also argue the hollow still gives you a better visual over the enemy in comparison to the iron sight, because the iron sight will sort of cover the enemy, making it harder to see exactly what they're doing, while the hollow sight still gives you that full clear picture. Moving on to the M60, I feel like this one is definitely probably one of the most game-changing ones because the iron sight is so obtrusive to gameplay, blocking up most of your screen, even above the sight, which is very different. And so these are the red dots that don't really make too much of a difference, and I would argue that they could be just a preference thing, but these still change how you play the weapon. The last red dot I want to cover, and this one is pretty big, the Revolver red dot. This one was very interesting to test because I noticed that the red dot on the Revolver actually increases your magnification. So if you notice, the difference between these two is like when you ADS, the one on the right side with the red dot, it's more zoomed in than the left side whenever you aim down the sights. Revolver, for some reason, it's the same red dot sight as like the M60, same red dot sight as the AKM, but yet this red dot sight has a zoomed in or more magnification for some reason. Maybe because the Revolver is a handgun, I guess, but like the V9S is also a handgun technically. Moving on to the ACOG sights. I'm not sure if they're actually called ACOG sights, but that's what I'm going to call them for this video. So basically the sight with the red arrow in them. Starting with the FAMAS, the ACOG sight has a more zoomed in magnification than the no ACOG sight version. And basically what this means is that targets will appear larger at the same distance, and if the targets are larger, it might be easier for you to be able to hit your shots. In comparison between the sight and no sight model, it seems like the FAMASs are very comparable. They both take up around like the same amount of space. The ACOG scope does seem to provide more of a circle to see enemy movements and stuff like that, similar to the red dot, while the iron sight FAMAS sort of has a smaller circle which can block more of your aiming and the bottom part of the enemy. Moving on to the LH1, there's a very significant difference in the amount of area taken up by the iron sight in comparison to the ACOG sight one. The iron sight taking up a lot more of the space on your screen, while the ACOG one taking up a lot less. For this one, the ACOG sight also increases the magnification when you ADS, so things are more zoomed in comparison to the non-ACOG sight. Also, the iron sight also has a circle that could be blocking sort of the information on the enemy's movements. The LH1 does provide a sniper glint when you ADS with the ACOG. The FAMAS does not provide a glint when you aim down sights with. I'm not sure why they are different, even though they're the same scope. And moving on to the last one, On the MP5 or the XP54, the ACOG sight for the XP54 does increase magnification, and the iron sight having a very small circle area around the center, the ACOG XP54 does seem to take up less space than the iron sight XP54. For the last alternative sight I'm going to cover, I'm not really sure what to call this. I'm probably just going to call it, I don't know, sniper scope, or it's similar to the ACOG but not really the same. It has the red arrow, but the scope is much larger. This is on the Pike. The scope also provides a magnification increase, but the magnification increase is very huge. I guess the main thing that separates this scope from like every other scope and every other weapon is that the scope really takes up a lot more of your screen. Like, you can barely even see the weapon model, but the majority of your screen will be the sniper scope in comparison to the iron sight, where like a lot of the weapon model and your hands are showing. But with the sniper scope, you can kind of see almost everything in sort of your field of vision. Or the iron sight, you kind of have to deal with the small iron sight and also the circle blocking visuals around the enemy target. And another thing with the sniper scope is that in game, when you're using it, the enemy will be able to see a white glint alerting them to your location, or maybe making it harder for them to shoot your head or upper body, depending. It's very uncertain, I think, sort of what effect it can have against the enemy, but definitely makes you stand out a little more. Should you use the alternative sights? I think in general, any weapon that has an option to add a sight or keep a sight on the gun, I think is a better choice than any iron sight, mainly because you get such a better visual advantage in terms of seeing all of your enemy. And also, most of the weapons with the sight on usually take up less of your screen, which also allows you to see more of your surrounding. And on some of the sights, it also gives you a magnification boost, which makes enemies more zoomed in and bigger, which could help you aim at the enemy more accurately. If you look at a game like R6 or Rainbow Six Siege, the ACOG or highest magnification scope usually is the most picked scope because of its ability to see enemies larger at further ranges. However, my opinion about the alternative sights is very bad, because I feel like these sights really provide different ways to play the same weapons that everyone experiences, and locking these sights behind a VR's paywall or anything like that is not a big deal, but I feel like it sort of puts people on a different playing ground than other people that don't have the sights. Even if they're using the same weapon, you could still feel disadvantaged because you don't have access to the scope, where another player probably has the scope and could be doing a lot better than you. I think another issue with the alternative sights is that it's going to be hard for the developers to balance weapons because there are two versions of that same gun. Which version of the weapon are they going to use to balance the game? A person that uses an iron sight LH1 versus a person that uses a scope LH1, which weapon are they going to be balancing the game for? And I just feel like this alternative sight thing is causing more problems than solving any problems with the game in general. And the main reason why I think this is an issue, or these are like big problems, is because when I asked Embark Oscar about the alternative sights for this season before the season dropped, he said this.
I think what Graphics is looking to do is add more opportunities for players to express themselves. But something like a focus is a perfect
And basically he said that these alternative sights are just a different way for people to play the game, sort of like changing your mouse sensitivity. It should be just preference. And looking at these alternative sights now in game, I feel like these aren't just preferences. This isn't like changing your mouse sensitivity. It's actually choosing a benefit or a non-benefit to your gameplay. Being able to see at further ranges with different scopes is not just a preference thing. It actually changes how the game works. It actually changes how much you can see. It changes a lot of your gameplay in different ways. It changes what types of fights you should be taking based on your scope. I feel like this isn't a path the game should be going down towards. These modifications to the guns are slowly pushing this game towards more of a COD-like class system, where most of your customization will come down to what attachments you have to your guns, which isn't entirely bad, but there'll always be a meta within those attachments including the meta within the game in terms of builds and gadgets and stuff like that. And I feel like that just complicates the game so much, and people would just have very vastly different experiences using the same weapon, which is something I'm not a big fan of, especially if the devs want to keep up with balancing, which, let's be honest, they haven't been doing very well at, in my opinion. RIP Goose Ship, hashtag where is Charge and Slam nerf? Ways to fix alternative sights. I would prefer if the alternative sights were truly preference, and making them truly preference would require them to make it so that the sight doesn't give you a magnification boost. Would also require sort of making the models or the aim down sights sort of similar to what it is on the iron sights, but I don't think that's as a big deal. But definitely the magnification should not be different across different sights, because then you have two different guns basically that give you a different advantage if you have it on or off. I also think the glint is also an issue. If the weapon doesn't have a glint with no sight on, it should also have no glint with the sight on, because it's the same weapon. Why does having a sight on change the advantage or disadvantage you have in a fight? Doesn't really make sense to me. So basically that concludes my video, and hopefully that answers some of your questions about alternative sights, and hopefully gives you a bit more insight into alternative sights in general. I've been getting asked about the alternative sights a lot on my YouTube stream as well as my Twitch stream, and yeah, hopefully that helps y'all. And if you have any questions, please leave any comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.